What's up, Fantasy Kingdom? Welcome to the Fantasy Kings podcast. I'm your boy Peez, here with my co-host Carlito. Say what up, Collie.
What's up, everybody? How you doing, Peasy?
Doing great, man. We got a great episode today. Also, this is a very important episode for the Fantasy Kings, as our league mates have found the podcast, so now they're going to be listening. It's going to be a test of our integrity to see if we keep giving you the fire we've been given, because now they found it. So,
hey, haters gonna hate. You know, it's all good. It's all good.
So we're still going to keep giving out the hot tips. Today we're going to go over auction strategy for your auction drafts, things to really look out for, and I think it's going to be a good episode. What do you think, Collie?
I think it's great. I think today is really going to focus more so on just the different styles and preferences that people may have that we're just going to shed light a little bit. It's important to know that there's not one template that fits all. There's just preferences, and that's the cool part about auction is you can be yourself, and it speaks to the individual and kind of how you want to build your team. I love it.
Exactly. So basically what we got is we're going to have 3 tips from each of us. So pay close attention and we'll get to it. All right. So the first tip for me is going to be track the previous auction. So if you're in a league that's been doing auction a long time, talk to your commissioner and see if you can get the past auction data, right? For me, I do this every year as I look at the previous drafts to see, hey, what are the top quarterbacks going for? What are the top running backs going for? What are the top receivers going for? Trying to figure out, hey, what are people going for? And if you've done, if your league is a long time auction, go back and look at those drafts because your spending patterns are likely going to be similar. So study previous drafts is my first tip if that's an option available to you.
Yeah, keyword there. I think it more comes down if it's an option, but I think the main, I would just say highlighted word there is study. You definitely want to pay attention, and if you can't do that, I think it's just nothing but power, right? I'll start off with my first tip, which I would go with, and I would say player discounts and looking for stacks. There's always going to be some players a part of high-performing teams, desirable teams that will have several players that are going way before a lot of non-popular teams. And most of the time, if you take out the first player that's drafted on that team, you can usually get the second player at a good discount. Here's a good example. Jamar Chase, he's either going to go as a number 1, maybe number 2, possibly number 3. But then you have T. Higgins on the same team. There's no way he's going in the top 5. He's definitely going to go in the top 15, 1,000%. But you're going to be saving about, depending on your
20%.
I was going to say, depending on your budget, you're going to save at least 5 to 20%, depending on the league that you're in. And also stacking, it's going to be easier for you to stack certain players and give you that option to pair them with the quarterbacks. And here's another example. Aaron Rodgers is going to go for cheap this year. Nobody really wants him. He's in maybe the top 15 in QBs. And then you have Garrett Wilson. So if you spend money on him, you can look as a strategy to spend money on the QB to get those double points. So that would be my first, is looking for player discounts on certain teams, trying to get the second, player that would be drafted on that team, and then seeing if there's a possible stack, whether it's a running back or...
Yeah, because, you make a good point there. You're not going to get a discount on Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill. Like, those guys are going to go over the top. But if you want to take a risk on, Waddle or Higgins, who I don't even think that's really a risk, to be honest with you. Those are quality players. You can likely get them for much cheaper.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing. All right, so my second tip is to make tiers. So this goes into your preparation. You want to have tier 1 running backs, tier 2, tier 3. And, it could be different for everybody. Like my wide receiver tiers are a lot different than Collin's would be.
Yep.
So what I like to do is I like to get in at the top of the tier. So if I'm targeting a running back in tier 2 and I've got 4 running backs in that tier, the first name called, that's who I want to bid on, because scarcity is coming. So once that guy's gone, the price is likely going to go up for the other guys in that tier. So,
and you know what? I just want to jump in there because a good point there. Usually the first player in a tier that's drafted is going to set the tone for a price. That first guy may be either somewhat discounted, and then the second and third guy and fourth guy are comparable as far as price, or it's going to be cheaper, or it's going to be way above, and you're like, oh, I got to steal. So definitely like that strategy.
Yeah, so you always want to make sure that you've got that, handled, because if you have a tier of guys, you get the first one, then you're going to be all good. If you get the last one, you're likely going to spend more than that player is worth.
Yeah, and that also feeds into my next strategy. My next tip is nominating players in certain tiers and driving up the price. So nominating players you either want or don't want is a part of the strategy, and then also being part of the bids. But being okay with knowing that you're bidding on them, you could be the next bid, but secretly knowing that you're hoping that someone's going to be throwing another $1, another $2, another $5 more just because they're a desirable player. I love that strategy. I love being a part of it. It keeps you active, so you're not let's just say gun shy when it's your turn to actually really dive into expend on the players that you actually want. So I would say that, after that, nominating players that you either want or don't want, and then just participating,
staying active in the draft.
I think that's a good strategy.
Even if you don't want the players, it's, you got to be careful with that sometimes, because I've seen people get burned trying to drive the price up, and the bidding just ends. So that is a good strategy, but it's one you really got to watch.
Right.
So my third and final tip on the auction drafts coming from my end is you really want to track everyone's budgets, right? If you need to know how much money is left in the room. That's a key for the whole thing. Your strategy is going to be based off of, okay, so I have, and this is just an example, I have $100 left. Who has more money than me? Who has less money than me, right? So I know that when I'm bidding against them, okay, well, this guy's going to be able to outbid me, or hey, this guy has way less money than me, so I'm confident in my bids. So that's something you always want to do. You always want to know who has what, and if you can incorporate, hey, what does that person need? So if it's the last quality quarterback and they have more money than me, I'm going to be in trouble if I don't have a quarterback already.
Absolutely, and I just think that that's such a calculated strategy. There is just you're projecting what other people are wanting to spend, or what they can spend, or what they need to spend. So definitely, I think that's something you should consider, and especially for seasoned, I would just say, players with auction. And I'll lead into my final tip with that is I honestly think that you should figure out whether you want to save or whether you want to spend. So a couple strategies here is a little conflicting. One is saving your money right off the bat, letting I would just say maybe 2 to 3 rounds go by of not getting anybody. Most of those first people in those rounds are going to be going for basically the majority of the money. So if you have a good amount, it just means you're not going to have any of the top tier players on your team, but you're going to have a lot of consistent guys, I would say maybe within 15 to about 25 in their position. And that could ultimately get you, consistent wins. Second also would be, do I just want to spend, my load on, 2 players, 3 players? I've seen some of our drafts, some people love to just spend $100 on the top guy. And sometimes it gets them to the dance the second season. And then it really becomes just an auction, part of whether you're going to be active in the waivers and, whether your studs that you pay for perform.
Yeah, and I've seen, to build on what you're talking about there, I've seen guys who literally will say, don't even show up to an auction until an hour afterwards, trying to get, trying to get the late steals. But I think there's also something to be said about getting in early also. So, my strategy tends to be, I don't get a lot of players in the middle. I get a lot of players at the top and then a lot of players at the end. Some people shoot for all middle. So you got to decide where you want to be with your team and make that decision for you, for what's best for you and your strategy.
Yeah, especially because I think there's just so many factors to go into the drafting, right? Some people's strategy can screw up your own. But I think that's just something to play with, and I think it's important that as have your budget set is, you're tracking what you have, and then you're kind of figuring out which route you want to go. It's important to building your team. You don't really need the later rounds as far as the last 2 or 3 players. Those are really just hoping that you're going to, get some wins with those random picks of yours.
Oh, and so actually we're going to do a bonus tip. Pause. But the bonus tip I've got for everybody is never spend more than the minimum bid on a kicker or defense. Don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe $2 on the best defense.
No, don't do it.
Other than that, no need.
See, he's already breaking it.
But hey, it's okay. Sometimes I will basically, go with the preference there. That could be the difference maker. If you have the number one kicker, you have the number one defense. But if you're spending $2, I'm okay with it. But if you're spending more, but I guess we'll see how that goes, right?
Don't do it. All right, well, that's going to end this episode of the Fantasy Kings podcast. Want to give a shout out to the League of the Fuck Boys for finding our podcast, and now you know our strategies. We'll see if it matters. I mean, it probably won't because you guys are not good, but we'll see how it happens. Any last words, Collie?
No, I just think today just shows the many different styles in which you can play to with this type of format, which is great for fantasy. All
right, well, thanks for watching this episode of the Fantasy Kings, and remember, when you're playing fantasy,
you play for the crown.
Catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Fantasy Football Kings. You can always reach out to us on Twitter at FFB_Kings or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're available wherever you get podcasts, so don't forget to download, subscribe, review, and rate 5 stars.